Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are having our esteemed faculty, Professor Tushar Kar with us, Fellowship Laparoscopic Surgery USA, Professor and HOD, Department of OB Gynecology, SCB Medical College, Cuttack, Odisha, Srushti Hospital, Cuttack. He was the chairperson ICOG 2019 to 2020, Vice President FOGSI 2010, Chairperson FOGSI Oncology 2004 to 2009, National Corresponding Editor, FOGSI Journal 2014 to 16, Peer Reviewer, IJOG Indian Edition, Executive Committee Member, ICOG 2015 to 17, Executive Committee Member, IAGE 2015 to 17, Organizing Secretary, IAGE Annual Conference 2016, Organizing Chairperson, Annual National ICOG Conference 2019, faculty and resource personnel in many national and international conferences, seminars and workshops, contributed many chapters in many textbooks, published many articles in national and international journals, authorized 2 textbooks, Do's and Don'ts in OBGYN, and Safeguard and Safe Surgical Practice. Your candidate for FOGSI Presidentialship 2022, recipient of Adarsha Chikitsaka Award 2007, Mani Manika Award 2010, Dharanidhar Award 2010, Best Medical Publication DC Datta Award 2011, Tarini Prativa Sammana 2015, Best Original Foxy Journal Publication Award 2018. So Professor Tusharkar, over to you.
Thank you very much for your nice introduction. At the outset, I welcome all of you to this postprandial aerosol, you can say, this platform for a very important topic that all of you are interested, but at the same time, from the land of Lord Jagannath, praying God for this corona period, especially rapid recovery from a disaster of the world that is COVID-19. And I pray Lord Jagannath for all of us to become healthy and cured and not to spread more the COVID-19. So the topic of discussion today is laparoscopic management of adnexal mass. All of us know that adnexal mass is a common problem and a common complaints with the patient, and many of us are dealing in day-to-day practice. It is rightly told that a doctor is a student till he dies. Once he considers himself not a student anymore, the doctor inside him dies. I repeat again, a doctor is a student till he dies. That means we have to remain student. And in other words, it is told that whether you are at 20 or 80, if you stop learning and if you keep learning, that you keep young. So likely once the doctor considers himself not a student anymore, the doctor inside him dies. So you can see one of my patients, Bhagyasri, on 1st of April, she presented me with pain in the lower abdomen. Surprisingly, she came with her parents, and I could recognize that the mother of the patient, around 19 years back, she came to my chamber with a history of primary infertility with polycystic ovarian disease. Now, so much coincidental that it was a medical resistant case of polycystic ovarian disease, for whom I did a LOD, laparoscopic ovarian drilling, and consequently she conceived. And after that, this girl resulted, and this girl again presented, you can see, with this mass in the abdomen, and you can very well identify that what is this mass. This mass seems, from the video, So many of you can identify this. This is a large torsion ovarian cyst. But the peculiarity is that on the left side, the tube is totally twisted 5 times or 5 round along with the ovarian cyst. You can very well judge from the color of this cyst that already the gangrene has started. And you can see that we tried to derotate or untwist, but still then after some time also there was no resolving and the cyst was aspirated and salpingo-oophorectomy was done on that. Fortunately, the right ovary and the right tube was healthy. So with this, now we can see that adnexal masses is a common clinical problem affecting women of all ages. That in our clinical practice, we see that starting from a pre-pubertal age till a perimenopausal woman, anybody can present with an adnexal mass. So what is an adnexal mass? We must know that any mass situated in the adnexa region, mainly arising from the uterus, ovary, fallopian tube, or connective tissue. But most important thing, it must be situated in the appendages area. And majority of the adnexal masses are benign and discovered incidentally during imaging or on pelvic examination. But few of them, they present with the certain symptoms, mainly pain abdomen, urinary problem or bowel disorder. The risk rises with the increasing age. If the age is more, there is chance of more malignancy. Now the poor rate of survival results from a lack of early warning signals, sensitive screening or early detection technique. The problem is that majority of the adnexal tumor, especially malignant variety, they do not give early symptoms. They are detected very late and there is no universal screening for these adnexal mass or the ovarian tumor, and early detection techniques are not available so far. So that is the problem for which there is more malignancy rate. Some women may present with acute torsion or rupture and peritoneal signs requiring immediate surgical intervention. But those who are presenting, especially the young girl, adolescent girl, and in the reproductive age group, they present with a torsion adnexa. For them, it is easy to deal with that. But at that time, many of the cases we are seeing that either the ovarian cyst and there is compromise of the fallopian tube of that side as well as the ovary, for which we have to sacrifice both ovary and the tube for the torsion and whenever the gangrene has already occurred, and we are not in a stage to conserve the tube of the ovary of that side. Now how to diagnose? The most adnexal masses arise from the ovary. That out of all adnexal mass, majority is contributed by the ovarian origin. Now, primary goal of diagnostic evaluation is the exclusion of the malignancy. Once we exclude the malignancy, so majority of the problem is over. So what are the differential diagnoses? That extra-ovarian masses, especially ectopic pregnancy, tibiovarian abscess, pedunculated fibroid, diverticular abscess, fallopian tube cancer, and many things arising from other also connective tissue. But ovarian mass mainly comprises of the physiological cyst and lutein cyst, endometrioma or the chocolate cyst of the ovary, theca lutein cyst, primary neoplasm and metastatic carcinoma. So starting from the benign till malignancy, starting from the endometrioma or the chocolate cyst till the uveitis or the infection, and also at times there is abscess we can get, like in case of a tuberculosis. So what are the diagnostic evaluation include? Thorough history. History is very important, whether she is coming with a pain abdomen, urinary problem or the bowel disorder. Then you have to go for a physical examination and investigation, obviously with or without laboratory studies, and especially the tumor marker. And the ultimate diagnostic tool are the histological examination. From the histology or from the biopsy, you can confirm that yes, there is this type of adnexal mass is there. Now, from the history, special attention should be paid to patient's family history. And we know that in BRCA2 BRCA gene, so there is malignancy of the breast, colon, and with ovary. So with this, you can, yes, you can be sure that there is more chance of adnexal mass, especially from the ovarian origin. Then characteristic of our pain, where is the site of the pain? Is it in the lower abdomen, left or right? Is it radiating to the bladder or to the rectum? And then obviously the menstrual history will guide from the history towards the diagnosis. So more severe or more frequent than expected symptoms are more likely to be associated with malignant ovarian masses. If the symptoms are aggravated, so you can think in the line of the malignancy. Now, the risk factor for ovarian cancer are nulliparity, history of infertility and or endometriosis, and family history of breast, ovarian or colon cancer are considered, I have told, BRCA gene. So, if with these history are there, you should more concentrate to exclude the malignancy and especially with the BRCA gene. Now, postmenopausal women using hormone replacement therapy are at an increased risk of ovarian cancer. So, those women in the postmenopausal age, if they are using at all HRT, we should think in the line of the malignancy. Now, how to go for a physical examination? So, you must do a post-speculum examination. And post-speculum examination, if it is an unmarried girl, instead of a post-speculum or vaginal examination, we should go for a PER or colorectal examination. But if it is a reproductive age group or a perimenopausal or a postmenopausal woman, you must do a PS examination, from which you are getting an opportunistic pap screening. So in the post-speculum examination, you can take a pap smear and exclude the malignancy. And what do you see? You see the size of the mass. You locate the whether left side, right side, anteriorly, posteriorly, or midline mass. Then you see the consistency of the mass. And last but not the least, mobility of the mass and tenderness, of course. So you can delineate a lot of things from the post-speculum and PV examination. So when it is performed in conjunction with a rectal examination, post-speculum and PV under anesthesia have limited utility both for detection and differentiation of an adnexal mass. So PR examination is an adjunct. It is never a replacement for a post-speculum or a PV examination. But mainstay of examination is a PS and PV examination. Now, detection rates as low as 60% have been reported. Detection rates are also hampered by obesity. If it is obese, very difficult to palpate, to see the size of the mass, to see the tenderness and the mobility of the mass. So therefore, you must be cautious while doing examination in an obese woman. Now, coming to the investigations, the imaging is the mainstay investigation for an adnexal mass. Then multiple imaging modalities starting from ultrasound, magnetic resonance imaging, CT scan, PET scan. But TVS has also emerged as the imaging modality because of its widespread availability, tolerability of the patient and cost effectiveness. So therefore, out of these, if you are asked which is the best one, TVS is the only one. But remember, we have to add with the power Doppler or the color Doppler whenever necessary, especially to differentiate from a malignant to a benign one. Now, the UK collaborative trial of ovarian cancer screening have shown that screening involving early CA125 with second line TVS at the highest sensitivity, that is 89.4% and specificity of 99.8%. That means if you combine the tumor marker, that is CA125, along with the TVS, perhaps that gives the best result, and sensitivity is almost, it's up to 90%. So you can imagine how it helps along with the tumor marker and the TVS instead of alone only TVS. Now, in the ultrasound should be the first step to characterize the lesion. Now, transabdominal sonography or TVS, I told TVS scores over the TAS. That means if you are given two chances, whether you do a TAS or a TVS, always TVS is better provided she is a married girl and a parous woman. Now, morphodimensional evaluation and assessment of the mass and vascularization and its growth can be well seen by the TVS when you combine with a color Doppler. So, observation of the contralateral ovary, other ovary can be seen. Detection of other malignant signs such as the presence of ascites and the peritoneal carcinomatosis and omental thickness or omental deposits. These can be visualized also by the ultrasound. So therefore, if you combine all these things, perhaps TVS is the best one. So what are the ultrasonological features in non-pregnant, also valid in pregnancy with an increased risk of malignancy? So when you suspect from the ultrasound that here are the features of the malignancy, the first is irregular, solid tumor. It should be multilocular. If it is a unilocular, perhaps it is a benign one. If it is a solid one, it is a malignant one. If it is a multilocular, it is a malignant one. Then irregular masses with more than 10 centimeter. Always remember, a pathological cyst of today, in the modern era, it is more than 10 centimeter. Now, septa thicker than 2 to 3 millimeter. Whenever there is a thin septa, benign is there. Whenever a thick septa, it is more towards thick, and irregular septa, it is more towards malignancy. And presence of more than 3 papillary projection. If there is projection in the papillary form are there, more than 3, and there is chance of malignancy. And of course, exuberant blood flow in the color Doppler. So presence of ascites or peritoneal masses, if there is ascites associated with it, always it is the ovarian malignancy, says C, that is all C, either 1, 2, 3, 4, all C is there. Whenever C is there, it is the ascites. In addition to that, if there is peritoneal masses, it can be detected by the ultrasound. So all these features, starting from the solidity of the tumor, capsule size, thickness of this capsule, and the irregularity in the capsule, projection, and also the blood flow, all these things, and the locularity, that is multilocular, more than one number, it's always go toward the malignant ovarian tumor or malignant adnexal mass. So high sensitivity and specificity can be obtained by application of IOTA. What is IOTA? That International Ovarian Tumor Analysis. Group rules in ultrasound evaluation of premenopausal and postmenopausal women. What is that? B1 you can see is a unilocular thing. So you can see unilocular is B1. B2, what does it mean? Presence of solid components with largest diameter less than 7 millimeter. What is B3? Presence of acoustic shadows. What is B4? Smooth multilocular tumor with the largest diameter less than 100 millimeter. What is B5? That is no blood flow, color score is 1. So with this, you can go for a M1. Then what is M1? That is irregular solid tumor, which I have described earlier. And M2, presence of ascites. M3, at least 4 papillary structures are there. And M4, that is irregular multilocular solid tumor with largest diameter more than 100 millimeter. And M5, very strong blood flow, that is color score is 4. So all these things, starting from a B1 till M5, you can combine together and describe to a particular tumor that here is a tumor with this IOTA scoring of B1 and M5. So you can combine with this unilocularity with this solid tumor and ascites, everything, all the features of the malignancy can be given in one form, or you can define one tumor into a specific IOTA scoring system. Now, ultrasound scoring system such as pelvic mass score, that is PMS, is very nice. It's not a postmenopausal syndrome, it is the pelvic mass score suggested by Rossi and colleagues, and the RMI. All of us know that, you all are aware of that RMI, that can be used to determine the likelihood of malignancy. So in our clinical practice, always use RMI, risk of malignancy index. All of you are using that in your day-to-day practice. So a meta-analysis of various scoring systems revealed a pooled sensitivity and specificity ranging from 86% to 91% and from 68% to 83% respectively. So therefore, the sensitivity is more with the pelvic mass score than of than that of RMI. Though you are using RMI, but the sensitivity with the pelvic mass score is more. Now, endometriomas will consist of round, homogeneous fluid filled mass with low glucose, and echogenic particles might be there. But remember, in the endometrioma or the chocolate cyst of the ovary, the capsule might be thickened also, but it is not irregular. And that is a round homogeneous fluid with the low glucose. At times you can find the echogenic particles, that is hemorrhagic laden particles. Now, mature teratoma will contain hypoechoic components and multiple small homogeneous interfaces, because here you can find three germs layers. So, various structure of various specific gravity from ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm, which will give different pictures, hypoechoic picture in the ultrasound, which will suggest towards cystic mature teratoma or a dormant cyst of the ovary. Now, hydrosalpingia cyst. So you can differentiate from the ultrasound alone or from the pelvic mass score, all this starting from malignancy, whether it is a malignant one or it is a chocolate cyst or a endometrioma or it is a cystic teratoma or a dormant cyst of the ovary or it is a tubal origin in the form of a hydrosalpinx or a pyosalpinx. Now, MRI and CT scan should be reserved for those cases in which ultrasound evaluation is insufficient for clinical decision planning. Now, what is the scope of MRI? That whenever you have doubt in the ultrasound, suppose ascites is there, you want to localize more whether the liver is involved or not, under surface of the diaphragm, omental thickening, pelvic lymph nodes, abdominal lymph nodes, other structures. So when you spread the metastasis, in those cases, you take the help of the MRI. So it is useful for characterizing large masses and evaluating their relationship with the adjacent structures. Depreciating masses appearing to have an adnexal location on ultrasound, but actually having a different organ filiation. So whenever you doubt that the origin is not from the ovary, maybe from the nearby structure, so you take the help of the CT or the MRI, and depending on the cases, the MRI is superior at many times from the CT scan, especially in a malignant case. This is also useful when an advanced stage malignant tumor is suspected, as I have told, requiring the assessment of the retroperitoneum, like the retroperitoneal lymph nodes, abdominopelvic cavity, I told under surface diaphragm, liver, and lymph nodes, obviously the abdominal and pelvic lymph nodes. So if you find that there is doubt from the diagnosis by the ultrasound or the TVS, or there is, you think that there is an advanced stage ovarian cancer, in those cases, you take the help of the MRI. But there is no current role for PET scan in the evaluation of adnexal mass. For only pure diagnosis, the PET scan has no role in a clinical practice for an adnexal mass, even if there is a malignant ovarian tumor. So, what are the laboratory studies? After imaging, after getting the result from the ultrasound, CT scan, MRI, or TVS even, so you do certain studies. So, what are those? You go for a serum marker or the tumor markers, complete blood count, serum electrolytes, urine analysis, and fecal occult blood test. Especially with the gynecologist, many times forget about the stool for occult blood. But in our clinical practice, we must do that. That is fecal occult blood test, especially to differentiate a secondary ovarian tumor or a metastatic ovarian tumor, especially Gutenberg type of tumor where the primary malignancy is the stomach. So in those cases, you may take the help of a gastroenterologist to do the upper GI endoscopy, find a lesion after the occult blood test is positive. Then you see bilaterality of the Gutenberg tumor. If there is bilateral ovarian tumor, maybe it may be a secondary to a other lesion, especially maybe from the stomach. So with this, then you go for one of the most common tumor marker, that is CA-125. We know that it is elevated in approximately 80% of the women with ovarian cancer, especially in the serous epithelial tumor of the ovary or the epithelial tumor of the ovary, any epithelial tumor, this serum CA-125 is invariably increased in only 50% women with stage 1 disease at the time of diagnosis. So what happens? It is not a diagnostic criteria, but in 50% of the cases it is increased, but majority cases it may not be increased. So therefore we must be cautious while diagnosis only from the CA125. Then you can ask me, what is its role? The exact role of CA125, it is a prognostic marker. It is never a diagnostic marker. Now at the early diagnostics, or whenever the patient has approached you, you advise for a CA125, see, treat it, and subsequently on due course of treatment you do it, whether it is regressing or not, the lesion is regressing and the patient is cured or not. For that is it required. A non-specific marker in the endometrial cancer, certain pancreatic cancer, endometriosis, uterine fibroid, and pregnancy. We know that this CA125 is responsibility due to mesothelium. Anywhere in the body system, even the normal mesothelium, they produce CA125. What are those? Maybe from the ovarian mesothelium, maybe from the GI mesothelium, maybe from the pleural mesothelium, maybe from the cardiac mesothelium. So any tumor arising from all these lesions, starting from the genital organ, ovary, and even in the normal physiological woman also, it is increased than that of the normal and endometriosis, of course. So you must know that even in endometriosis, serum CA125 is increased. Now it has both poor sensitivity and poor specificity as a screening test for ovarian cancer, which I have told, it is never used for a screening test, for a diagnostic test. It is always used for a prognostic criteria. Now in postmenopausal population with a positive predictive value of 98% and a negative predictive value of 72%. Look at it. In a postmenopausal woman, it is very useful. So one of the case with a chocolate cyst, the another case with a serous epithelial tumor, mucinous cyst adenoma of the ovary. Now in both the cases, the CA125 will increase, but it depends on the size of the tumor, surface volume of the mesothelium. Now in case of a mucinous cyst adenoma, the CA125 might be 300, whereas in an endometrioma or a chocolate cyst of the ovary, this might be around 100, 90, 60, 70, more than 35 unit per ml. But in case of a mucinous cyst or a serous cyst adenoma, this may be 300, 400, 800. So the more, there is more chance of malignancy. Now in postmenopausal women with a positive predictive value of 98%, so perhaps it is helpful for the diagnosis to certain extent. Now in premenopausal patients, CA125 levels have a positive predictive value of only 49%. Look at this. In a premenopausal woman, young reproductive age group, the positive predictive value is very low, almost half of the postmenopausal women. So therefore, it must be used in a clinical practice with its own limitation. Now the risk of malignancy index, that two scoring system exists. So all of us are well versed, all the clinician, you are doing in a day-to-day practice, what is RMI, risk of malignancy index. So from this we can assess that whether this tumor is a really malignant tumor or not. So two scoring system exist, one is a RMI1, another is a RMI2. Each of which derives scoring using ultrasound features, menopausal status, and preoperative CA125 level. Remember, preoperative CA125, not after the operation. Using assays with a normal CA125 being less than, which I have told, 35 unit per ml according to the following equation. So how do you do that? The RMI score is ultrasound score into menopausal score into CA125 level in unit per ml. So again, that first is a ultrasound score into the menopausal score into the CA125 in unit per ml. So accordingly, you divide whether it is a low score or a moderate score or a high score. The RMI scoring system ultrasound features. What are the ultrasound features? The first is, if it is a multilocular cyst, the score 1, that is RMI score 1, that no abnormality, that RMI2 score 1, no or 1 abnormality. So if that is a multilocular cyst, you give 1 point. Presence of solid areas, you give 4 points. And bilateral of the lesion, 3, that is 2 or more abnormalities. And presence of ascites, that presence of intraabdominal metastasis. And premenopausal, RMI score 1 is 1, 2 is also 1. Then postmenopausal, that RMI 2 score is 4, and CA 125 level, you describe whatever the present in that patient. So example, like how to calculate RMI, a postmenopausal woman with a multilocular cyst with solid areas with ascites and a CA 125 level of 100 as RMI 2 score of 4 attributed by the first presence of solid areas, and the another 4 is multilocular cyst. Then 100 as 100 is given by this CA 125, so it comes to around 1600 score. So by that way you can calculate, but always remember it is the ultrasound score into menopausal score into CA 125 level, that is a biochemical marker. So that gives rise to the RMI score, but it is RMI 2. Again, to make you understand more, let us say that is a in a postmenopausal woman there is a multilocular cyst where with the solid area. So for that we'll give menopausal score is 4 and ultrasound score is 4, and the serum CA 125 is 100, that is 1600 as the RMI 2 score. Now coming to the therapy, so as you know, this if there is an adnexal mass, most important is diagnosis. The first diagnosis is there that you have to delineate what is the origin of the adnexal mass, whether it is from the ovary or it is from the tube or it is from the both tube-ovarian mass or from the connective tissue or at times pedunculated fibroid. So accordingly you have to deal. Then after that you have to decide whether I'll be going for a medical management or for a surgical management or combined one. If for a medical management, that is conservative management. So you have to delineate which are the cases. These cases I'll go for the medical management. Now suppose there is a lutein cyst or a physiological cyst, 5 cm thin wall, unilocular cyst, and CA 125 is normal. It is in the young reproductive young girl. So you give COC for 3 months, see whether it is resolved or not. So this is one of the medical management. So American College of Obstetric Gynec ACOG notes that simple cysts up to 10 cm in diameter are almost universally benign and can be safely followed without intervention even in postmenopausal cases. Look at it from our practice. They say still more that with close follow-up, without also COC, you can follow up, especially in the postmenopausal woman, if it is the size is less than 10 cm. Now, reviews have concluded that functional cyst will not regress more quickly with COC when compared with expected management. Look at this ACOG guidelines reviews. What it says that if you give a expectant management, no hormonal treatment, no COC, combined OCP, low dose pill, don't give. Again, functional cyst will not regress more quickly with the COC than that of an expectant management. Now the majority are physiologic or benign tumors that will resolve spontaneously. So therefore we have to wait. But there what happens in ACOG guidelines, the close-up or the observation should be, follow-up should be very strict. But in our cases, we say that you take this combined OC pill for 3 months low dose, then come back after 3 months if symptomatic in between. You come do an ultrasound with the Doppler, see the size of the cyst. If it resolves or decreases in size, then again you follow up asymptomatic cases. So that's the line. So therefore the message here that earlier to start with few years back, it was 5 cm by ultrasound, then 7 cm. The recent ACOG guidelines said that up to 10 cm in absence of any malignancy features, after the exclusion everything, you can, if it is a functional cyst, you can go for a conservative management, that with COC in absence of contraindication of the COC. Now the surgical management, you can see cyst larger than 10 cm and those with suspicious for malignancy require surgical exploration. I use the word surgical exploration, not the surgical approach. It should be exploration one. Now findings on laparoscopy that are concerning for malignancy. So whenever you put the laparoscope, you must see that the malignancy features are there or not. To start with, you can see what are those. You see the ovaries, surface ovarian excrescence is positive for malignant neoplasm. You can visualize there is papillary projection in the ovary. Both these ovaries are involved. The surface is irregular. There is ascites. You can suspect that even mild ascites, that is malignancy is there. So metastatic implants you can see visualized during laparoscopy survey in the upper abdomen and anterior abdominal wall. Why I say these things? Because once you put a diagnostic laparoscope, you see that is features of the malignancy. Again, it can modify your management immediately. Either you can go for a laparoscopy or convert for a laparotomy, and you can go for a debulking surgery or a total, that is neoadjuvant chemotherapy or whatever it may be. You can go from there. So therefore, friends, you must go for a laparoscopy one, and it should be a diagnostic to start with. Then only you can go for exactly whether does it require a laparoscopy, therapeutic laparoscopy, or for a laparotomy. Now, advantage of laparoscopy, all of us know that the pelvic and abdominal anatomy appears magnified. It is magnified in a great way and allowing precise diagnosis and treatment of the disease adjacent to vital organs, blood vessels, and nerve structure. The most important thing that the magnification, since the magnification is good, so you can see the lesion in a greater way. You can see the nearby structure, whether involvement is there or not. You can see the origin of the structure. And additional benefits of laparoscopy approach are minimized bleeding from the small vessels afforded by pneumoperitoneum. Once there is pneumoperitoneum, the minimal bleeding will be decreased or arrested. Now, elimination of large abdominal incision. Obviously, we don't incise. Then less adhesion formation, early ambulation and faster recovery, shorter hospital stay, less cost to the patient and to the hospital. Obviously, whenever there is a laparoscope, you only give the port and the patient can be discharged next day. Even with a small ovarian cyst, same day she can be discharged like a day care procedure. So therefore, in addition to all the advantages of laparoscopy, the greatest advantage is the magnification, and the structure can be seen in a magnified way. The other thing that I say, that undersurface the diaphragm, which are only approachable, not seen even with the big incision, longitudinal incision till the epigastrium, but it is difficult to visualize the undersurface diaphragm and the liver. The surface can be visualized in a greater way by the laparoscope. Now, how to retrieve the adnexal mass? Most important. Whenever you do a laparoscope, then after the diagnosis, you just decide whether this mass can be removed per se. If you do the dissection, after that, suppose that is simple ovarian cyst, and a young girl, you do a only cystectomy. You conserve the healthy portion of the ovary. If there is a damaged ovary, already ovary has been damaged, irrespective of the age, irrespective of the productivity, you have to sacrifice per se, otherwise that will be the septic lesion and that will be the focus of the infection. And you cannot conserve the ovary or the original structure anyway. Suppose that is a torsion adnexa, but there is a in the detorsion, that is blood supply is going, and you can conserve the tube. You have to keep the tube, but after that you exactly decide what you want to do. Whether you want to, like this case, you can see that this can be conserved to certain extent if whole of the ovary has been damaged. So you can go for a immediately frozen biopsy, and you see whether there is malignancy is there or not, and decide within 20 minutes the nature of the surgery, whether you can go for a conservative surgery or for a radical oophorectomy like that, or a salpingo-oophorectomy. Now, after that, how do you retrieve the tissue? So, usually in our practice, we retrieve or deliver the specimen by endobag, by the coldotomy, or extension of the lateral. I have seen many of the people, they are extending the lateral port, and some of them also taking out to the endobag. Even in absence of endobag, the reverse way of the gloves. But especially in my practice, what I am doing, majority of the cases, if she is a parous woman, if I am able to get the POD, pouch of Douglas, I am taking the or retrieving the mass through the coldotomy routinely. And after doing my series for last 30 years, there is no complication fortunately in the delivery of the coldotomy wound, and even at times there is need of resuturing of this coldotomy wound again. If it is hemostasis maintained, you can leave per se, it will automatically heal. Now, ovarian remnant syndrome, many of you, the practitioners, must have got the case of residual ovarian syndrome or ovarian remnant syndrome. Now, there is a case of hysterectomy, NDBH or a TLH, you have done to a 42 or 38 years woman 10 years back. Now, this patient which I am presenting, the video of that this case had undergone NDBH around 10 years, 15 years back. It was done by me, both the ovaries were healthy, and you see the right side ovary is forming a tubo-ovarian mass with the pain abdomen, and how difficult you have to retrieve the mass, or you have to dissect the mass keeping the ureter away, otherwise there is chance of ureter, because the lateral pelvic wall where you can get this problem there itself. So most important thing is to dissect, keep the vessels and the ureter away from the mass. Now, this ovarian residual syndrome, ORS, is defined as the persistence of functional ovarian tissues after oophorectomy. Now, you have done a oophorectomy, but still some amount of tissue is there. But the other way I am saying that residual ovarian syndrome. What is that? Whenever you are conserving the ovaries for a good case, healthy, normal ovary, you are conserving. Later on it developed a cyst or any abnormal pathology, and it form a mass that is known as residual ovarian syndrome. They present with the chronic pelvic pain, CPP, or they coming with the irritable bowel habit, or that is a urinary problem. But laparoscopic management of ovarian remnants was reported as early as 1992. But these are really difficult case, but I always like, whenever there is, I get a case of residual ovarian syndrome. Laparoscopic management of residual ovarian syndrome is feasible and safe in the hands of experienced surgeon. So you should not be hurried during that time. You must locate the anatomy, you must have a clean dissection, and you must have patience. Now, despite objection in the use of minimal invasive approaches in residual ovarian syndrome, case series have reported excellent outcome after laparoscopic management. Here you can see one case, that this is an example of a clear-cut case of laparoscopic removal of residual ovarian syndrome. Now, the next group is a borderline one. This is having low malignant potential tumor. Laparoscopically assisted vaginal hysterectomy for the management of a borderline ovarian tumor was reported in 1992. Many of us remember Harry Rich, who started the LAVS, laparoscopy assisted vaginal hysterectomy, way back in the year 1989. After 3 years of that, you see this laparoscopy hysterectomy along with a borderline ovarian tumor was very famous, provided the woman is little at the end of the reproductive age, around 40. Now, laparoscopy staging in borderline ovarian tumor has become increasingly common. Here is a situation where laparoscopy scores over the laparotomy, unlike frank case of malignant ovarian tumor, that is staging laparotomy. So, in a borderline ovarian tumor, the laparoscopy staging is better than that of a laparotomy staging, because we can see the other structure nicely in absence of any secondary or in absence of ascites, other deposits. Now, traditionally, staging of ovarian cancer had been performed by a laparotomy, as I have told, that is surgical staging by laparotomy or laparotomy surgical staging. There is evidence that in hands of experienced laparoscopy surgeon, staging of ovarian cancer is comparably safe and efficient with similar long-term outcome. So, if it is a borderline tumor, the staging would be better with the laparoscope than that of a laparotomy. Now, advanced stage invasive and recurrent ovarian cancer, laparoscopy can be used to effectively treat ovarian, primary peritoneal, fallopian tube malignancy. So, there was a saying that the minimal invasive surgery has no role, but there is definite role. And as a triage tool for resectability, second look evaluation, and for cytoreduction, may not be for a primary surgery, for a frank malignant ovarian tumor or primary peritoneal tumor, but mainly for a triage tool for easy resectability because of carbon dioxide pressure, For second look evaluation, just have a diagnostic evaluation, and for cytoreduction, because the visibility is better, the space, the area of the visibility is more with the laparoscope. Now, protocol for laparoscopic management in advanced ovarian cancer. Here is the algorithm that if you preoperatively suspect advanced ovarian cancer, that is abdominal, pelvic mass with ascites and mental caking. So, preoperative assessment from the history, physical examination, tumor markers and imaging studies, which I have told one by one. Then whether you diagnose, you evaluate she is eligible for surgery or not. If she is yes a candidate for surgery, then operative laparoscopy with biopsy to confirm Mullerian origin. That you have take a frozen biopsy or a general biopsy, you confirm in the first sitting. Then assess for ability to optimally debulk or not. Then you assess there whether debulking is possible or not. If it is yes, then assess appropriate surgical approach. By laparoscopy you are able to complete, by laparotomy or combined laparoscopy and laparotomy. In the process of laparoscopy, you should not hesitate to convert to a laparotomy. Now you go for a chemotherapy ultimately. But if she is not eligible for surgery, that you go for a paracentesis or CT guided biopsy to confirm Mullerian origin. Now you go for a, I told, neoadjuvant chemotherapy, then achieve clinical response. You see second look, no clinical response, experimental protocol are there. If there is achieve clinical response, then you should go for a interval cytoreduction surgery. So these are the steps or algorithm for a advanced malignant ovarian tumor to be approached by the laparoscope, and the role of laparoscope in case of a advanced malignant ovarian tumor. Now, proportion of adnexal masses detected throughout pregnancy. This is a very interesting case, neglected many times. That prevalence of adnexal mass in pregnancy is estimated to be around 0.19 to 8.8%. That means roughly it is less than 1% in our clinical practice, that whenever an adnexal mass is associated with pregnancy. Now, most cases are diagnosed in the first trimester. And period, as you know, see the series, that first trimester around 21 to 75%, second trimester 10 to 44%, third trimester 4 to 22%, and postpartum 7%. So there is a variation in the finding of adnexal mass starting from first trimester till the puerperal. Now the clinical presentation in pregnancy, majority cases are asymptomatic, being diagnosed as ultrasound or surgical finding. These are accidentally diagnosed in about 0.3% cases during cesarean section. Now 31 to 72% case will be resolved spontaneously. So if you do not give any treatment also, many will be, but if you say in the ultrasound that is a cyst, so the patient will bother, the attendants of the patient will bother you. A masses that persist throughout pregnancy tend to be displaced upwardly out of the pelvic cavity as the uterus increases in size. So therefore here in the first trimester of pregnancy, because the mass gets a space in the pelvis, there is chance of torsion. And again in the puerperum, there is a chance of torsion because delivery has occurred, involution has started. Now they may be incarcerated in the pouch of Douglas throughout the pregnancy. That may also be responsible for labor dystocia by obstructing the descent of the presenting fetal part. So therefore, at times it may be incarcerated in the pelvis during the first trimester, and it may be there lying there, and the size may regress until the delivery, and at time in the delivery period also this may obstruct for the spontaneous labor, the head to come. So with this, now go for the tumor markers. The interpretation of tumor markers in pregnant women require caution. Why caution? Because they may be increased during certain stages of pregnancy, like some oncofetal antigens like alpha-fetoprotein, HCG and CA125. These three may be increased % pregnancy. So therefore it will give a false positive result, which are involved in biological function associated with development, differentiation and fetal maturation. So in pregnancy per se, these three hormones, beta-HCG, alpha-fetoprotein and CA125 may be increased. I have told in a physiological condition, normal human being and pregnancy, the CA125 may be increased, which may differential diagnosis with endometriosis and the malignancy epithelial tumor of the ovary. So the main interest of tumor marker here seem to be the differentiation between primary and secondary adnexal tumor, the possibility to monitor the levels to evaluate the therapeutic response and the risk of relapse. So therefore, with the possibility of to monitor whether you can monitor the differentiation to the pregnancy value or not, that is important. Now, the frequency of complication of adnexal mass in pregnancy, you can see starting from torsion 1 to 27%, rupture 0 to 5%, malignancy 0 to 10%, abortion 0 to 6%, preterm delivery 5 to 10%. So majority cases, adnexal mass with pregnancy, they present to us with the adnexal mass. As a clinician, who all of you should remember that. Now the medical treatment according to ACOG, simple cysts up to 10 centimeter in diameter are almost universally benign and can be safely followed without intervention even in postmenopausal patients. What about pregnancy? I have told even in postmenopausal women this can be safely followed only. Hormonal contraceptions are often prescribed to suppress ovarian cyst. So you can give COC but with caution. Then functional cyst will not regress more quickly with estrogen progestin contraceptive therapy when compared with expectant management. I have told this will not resolve as quickly than that of a expectant management. Adnexal masses detected incidentally during routine sonography in pregnancy can also be followed expectant. So if it is not symptomatic, you just follow, ask the patient that you tell counsel that this may be physiological, it may resolve per se routinely. And the majority are physiologic or benign tumors that will resolve spontaneously. You have to counsel the patient. Who knows, this may be spontaneously resolved, but at the same time, you must tell the complication that might be torsion, that might be rupture, there might be infection. Now, the type of surgical approach may be laparotomy or a laparoscopy. So you can say, what is the scope of laparoscopy in pregnancy? See, lower operative pain, minor bleeding, early ambulation, reducing the risk of thromboembolic events, early resumption to bowel transit, a shorter hospital stay, faster return to activities of daily living, lower risk of surgical wound infection, and less uterine manipulation, with a consequently theoretical lower risk of preterm delivery. But some concern about a laparoscopy approach in pregnancy have been raised. What are those? In laparoscopy, some of the things are in our mind. What are those? High intra-abdominal pressure may compromise placental perfusion. So there is a IUCR might be there. There will be sudden death. So maternal conversion of carbonic acid into carbonic acid can result in fetal acidosis. These are our concern. And pregnant uterus may be injured during insertion of various needle or trocars. Obviously, in the first trimester, it will be very easy. There is no chance of injury to the uterus. So the Society of American Gastrointestinal and Endoscopic Surgeon stated that laparoscopy can be safely performed in any trimester of pregnancy, of course for a super laparoscopic surgeon. Some technical recommendation for performing laparoscopy in pregnant women includes, which all of us remember. What are those? The patient must be positioned in left lateral position to minimize inferior vena cava compression. In a normal laparoscopy, we are allowing in a supine position in the operation theater, but it should be in the left lateral position. Then initial access to the abdominal cavity can be safely performed by open surgery, that is Hassan technique, with a varus needle or by optical trocar, as long as the location takes into account the uterine fundal height and the previous insertion. I will always prefer a Hassan technique because it is a open laparoscopy. So carbon dioxide infiltration with 10 to 15 millimeter pressure is safe, but intraoperative carbon dioxide monitoring by capnography is recommended. So therefore, the pressure carbon dioxide should be 10 to 15 millimeter, and it should be monitored by capnography always whenever you are dealing with a pregnant woman for a laparoscope. The pneumatic compression devices are recommended in intra-abdominal and postoperative period, as well as early postoperative ambulation for venous thromboembolism prophylaxis. So for DVT prophylaxis, that thromboembolic prophylaxis, you have to use a pneumatic compression device. Then tocolytics should not be used prophylactically, but should be considered perioperatively in the presence of preterm labor signs. That means prophylactic, that is no scope of these tocolytics, but you can use in a perioperative if at all there is a features of the preterm contraction. So therefore, routinely the tocolytics should be avoided. Now, at last, I'll tell that every new idea is a joke until one achieves it. and every new thought is silly until one believes it. So therefore, friends, in the pregnancy, the laparoscopy is a really heroic work. Whenever, especially mid-trimester, in the late trimester, you have to take all the risks. You have to counsel the patient, especially about the carbon dioxide, and especially about this thromboembolic phenomenon and the tocolytics and position. You must be aware that she should be in the left lateral position. So with this, you must have a new idea. Unless you this every new idea is a joke, I told, until one achieves it, and every new thought is silly until one believes it. To start with, it may be a joke or it's a heroic work, but at the end, it will be very productive for the patient, provided to take all the safety procedures. Thank you very much. Chitambaran from Mumbai, you have asked a question: size of the tumor that causes malignancy. You see, as per SUG guidelines, what I have suggested, whenever a pathological cyst is more than 10 centimeter, per se, there is no cutoff dimension or the size for a malignant ovarian to be described. You can say that it is a small tumor, if it is less than 10 centimeter, can be a malignant one. If it is more than 10 centimeter, may not be a malignant one also. So therefore, there is no size of the tumor which delineate that here is a malignancy. But whenever pathological tumor for a functional cyst, that is the definition of the SUG, that if it is more than 10 centimeter, if it is a functional cyst, I say functional means all the features of malignancy have been excluded, then only you can go for a conservative management, follow-up expectant management, or SUOC treatment. Next, there is a question from Simin Delhi. How is adnexal mass treated with medication along with surgery? Yeah, you can see that along with surgery means, now suppose there is a surgical management, let us say 10 centimeter lutein cyst is there, or a physiological cyst is there, functional cyst is there, you go for follow-up. Now, this is a case of primary infertility. With the medical management, it doesn't resolve. And you have excluded everything for a primary infertility, all the investigations you have done. So you have to go for a surgical management. That is the greatest example where you can go for a medical management. Come to the malignant one. So whenever there is a case of advanced malignant ovarian tumor, you go for a neoadjuvant chemotherapy. You go with the chemotherapy, you downstage the disease, stage 4 to stage 3, stage 2, then go for the surgical. So these are the example of a combined medical management with the surgical one. Then Dr. Meena from Jharkhand, what is a right adnexal cyst? Can you explain in brief? A right adnexal cyst, obviously, it is a whenever it is situated on the right side of the right appendix area. Let us say that the right ovary is there. The appendages means it is the ovary, fallopian tube, and the connective tissue. The pariferon and epiferon, all these things are adnex area or the appendages area. Whenever it is in the right side, it is a right adnexal cyst. So, Dr. Gargi, Chennai, other than ultrasound, what can you emphasize again the use of MRI? Yes, whenever you doubt diagnosis from the ultrasound, so you get the help of the MRI. The reverse way, whenever there is an advanced case of malignancy, adnexal mass, ovarian malignancy, so for the management sake, for the therapeutic sake, you have to take help of the MRI. I have told how it helps. It delineates the lesion in the retroperitoneum. It delineates the region, upper surface of the diaphragm, liver, and or distance things. But ultrasound cannot give the information regarding all these things. In those cases, you have to take help of the MRI. Next is Mahagona from Bangalore. Dr. Mahagona, advanced malignancy will removal of the uterus help? Obviously, whenever there is an advanced malignancy, so you have to remove, we know that adnexal mass, the malignancy, adnexal malignancy may be mainly from the two sources. One is a ovarian malignancy, the other is a fallopian tumor. Both are, the route of spread is hematogenous, that is by the bloodborne. So if she is an elderly woman, achieve the family, we have to remove the uterus simultaneously. But let us say if she is in a young one, she is not married or interested for fertility, you can go for a fertility conserving surgery. In the sense, you can remove that the malignant source, then go for the pregnancy. After the pregnancy is over, you go for a radical procedure, including removal of the uterus. Now, Dr. Moria from Mumbai differences between endoscopic and laparoscopic management. How to differentiate CA ovary from pelvic endometriosis in case of fixed pelvic mass with raised CA 125? This is an excellent question, that differentiate between endoscopic and laparoscopic management. How to differentiate CA ovary from pelvic endometriosis in case of fixed pelvic mass with raised CA 125? That obviously here I have told that CA 125 is usually marginally increased in case of a endometriosis. But whereas if there is a malignant ovarian tumor, especially epithelial origin, serous epithelial tumor, malignant mucinous cyst adenoma, in those cases, this is increased to a certain large extent. That means the finding is around 400, 500. Whereas in case of endometrium or a chocolate cyst or endometriosis, this is increased around 100. Dr. Giri, yes, that is his question. Yes, and that is a role of iota scoring in evaluation of suspicious pelvic mass. And you know, iota scoring has a better value than that of the normal, that is risk of RMI. And iota has definitely a favorable advantage over the conventional one. Now again, pre-operatorily, how to do that? You have to go for the scoring one and then see, and accordingly you manage that. So another question from Dr. Moria from Mumbai, differentiate between endoscopic and laparoscopic management. So you see, endoscopy grossly, whenever, what do you mean by gynec endoscopy? It includes the laparoscope, hysteroscope, falloposcope, and you see that other one is the, whenever you combine the microhysteroscope, falloposcope, and fimbrioscopy or salpingoscopy, that whenever you combine these together, hysteroscopy with the falloposcopy, then you go for a evaluation of the infertility specially. So there you can see the normal diagnostic hysterolaparoscopy, we cannot see the endosalpinx. So by HSG, you can see the inside the endoscope, that is hysterosalpingography. Whenever you combine hysterosalpingography with the diagnostic hysterolaparoscopy, you can evaluate. But by the greater way, evaluation of the endoscopy can be done by the falloposcope and this hysteroscope. You combine one scope from the ostium side, that is from the by the hysteroscope or microhysteroscope, and from the fallop side, that fimbrial side, you can visualize well the endosalpinge. We know that endosalpinge is very important for the fertilization process to occur, and that is by this method you can see the endoscopy. But laparoscopy management, as you know, only by the laparoscope you can visualize the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity. So this is Dr. Alpana Rath, importance of BRCA mutation testing in ovarian tumor and to do. So actually, whenever there is a BRCA mutation testing, so ideally it should be done in a young reproductive age group, and with the history of BRCA in the family history, we should do routinely, and that these type of evaluation. And besides that also, whenever there is a family history, we should go for a prophylactic removal also. Dr. Bharti from Virudhunagar, if it's malignancy and small cyst says 7 to 8 centimeter in size, should we go ahead with laparoscopy, excision, laparotomy and procedure? Yes, you have to see the individualized case. Now your question is only 7 to 8 centimeter malignant one, small cyst, but there is features of malignancy. Now you have to see the age, you have to see the parity, and you have to see the other extension, let us say it is confined to ovary, there is no ascites, there is no C is there, so you can go for a only that oophorectomy of that site, or depends on that, you have to stage at that moment. So once the staging is not advanced, you can go for a conservative one to start with, and the treatment accordingly you can delineate, or you can just give the treatment depending upon the staging as well as age and the parents and the family structure. So as I have told, adnexal mass are those mass usually arises from the area of the appendages, and this is mainly originated from the uterus, ovary, fallopian tube and connective tissue nearby the adnexa. But majority of them are from the ovary, and here the adnexal mass may be in the form of benign or malignant, out of which the malignant is less in comparison to benign adnexal mass. The diagnostic modality starts from the history, examination, investigations, and from the history you can see either in the pain in the lower abdomen, or there is urinary symptoms, or the bowel disorder. With this, you go for the examination from the general examination, and for speculum, PV examination, or rectal examination will give guidance towards the diagnosis. Then you investigate. Investigate means mainly you go for the ultrasound examination. Then you can go for the ultrasound, mainly TVS examination, CT scan, MRI, PET scan. And if you go for the tumor marker, the most common tumor marker is the CA-125. If you are satisfied with this, then you definitely go for a diagnosis. And with this, you go for a risk of malignancy index scoring, which comprises of ultrasound score, menopausal score, and CA-125 value. Then you quantify that whether it is a malignant or not. If it is malignant, low risk, moderate risk, and high risk, that RMI. So with this, again, you go for the management. The management in the line of either you can go for a conservative management, or medical management, or a surgical one. If it is a surgical one, laparoscopy or a laparotomy. Majority of the cases can be dealt by the laparoscopy, it is surgical one. But again, the laparoscope has advantage over laparotomy in the sense magnification is better. The localization of the secondary or some other lesion, other structure, the origin of the tissue or the mass can be well delineated, well magnified by the laparoscope. And if it is a malignant one, you can convert from the laparoscopy to laparotomy at any point of time. But with a borderline ovarian tumor, laparoscopy scores over the laparotomy. And once you are confirmed that it is a frank malignant, you can go for a surgical staging either by a laparoscope or by the laparotomy. Thank you very much.